Okay, welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Nedarim. This is our 10th shiur in Masechet Nedarim, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 64 through 69. So I included tomorrow's Daf as well. Thank you everyone who is able to come on a different day, but thank you for your flexibility. So today we are actually going to be learning the entire ninth chapter. It is not very long. And we are going to start learning about two new concepts. We've mentioned them previously, but this is really the source. Um, the two concepts in Hebrew, the first one is hafara. Hafara means to revoke a vow. This is done by a woman's either father or husband, and we're going to talk about that in the next chapter. And the second concept is hatara. Hatara is annulment, and that we have seen previously. We've seen that it is done in front of three people, a beitin, or maybe in front of a chacham, a wise person. And basically, it could be done in front of anyone. And how does one annul a vow? One needs to find a petach. Literally, the word petach means an opening. But the way we're going to understand it in this chapter means that a person will say, if I would have known, fill in the blank, right? What I know now, I never would have taken the vow in the first place, right? And this, in essence, nullifies or annuls the vow, and it is doesn't exist anymore. Um, Okay, so the Mishnah tells us on Daf 64, you can use the honor of parents as a petach, as an opening to annul a vow. Right? How does this work? The Mishnah says that the vow would bring embarrassment to the parents. I never would have taken the vow in the first place, right? Or another opinion in the Mishnah is no, you cannot use it as a petach, as an opening. Um, the next idea, you can use the honor of God as a petach, right? Why? You can say that taking this vow is a lack of honor to God, what we would call kavod l'shamayim, right? It's disrespectful for God, and therefore it's enough to annul the vow. Or no, because then there would be no vows. The Gemara is going to explain what this line means in a minute. Um, the Mishnah continues. If the vow has something directly to do with the parents, then you can use their honor as a petach because there's a direct relationship between the parents and the vow that was made. Now we have a new concept. In Hebrew, the concept is called nolad. Nolad literally means to be born. We had this concept in Masechet Shabbat, something new. So here, in the case of a vow, it's a new development. So the Mishnah tells us a new development can be used as a petach, or maybe not, right? The fact that this development didn't exist at the time of the vow means it is not a way to annul the vow. So, what is an example of this? The Mishnah says, right, let's say the person became a scribe, or the person is marrying off a son, and then they say, right, I never would have taken this vow against this person if I would have known that I was going to become a scribe, or that his daughter was going to marry my daughter, right, my son. So here the Mishnah says this works as a petach, or another case, right? I won't go, right? A person says, I will not step foot into this house. and then the house becomes the shul, right? So now he can say, if I knew it would be a shul, I never would have taken the vow in the first place. So the Mishnah says this works, or, right, Chachamim, the sages say it doesn't work, right? Why doesn't it work? Because it didn't exist, right? This, right, let's say the house as a shul didn't exist at the time of the vow, and therefore it's not enough to annul the vow. So now the Gemara is going to explain, right? You if we can use, let's go back to the idea of using the honor of God to annul a vow. So the Mishnah says vows wouldn't work. Why? Because you'd never be able to annul a vow honestly, because someone will say, right, I wouldn't have vowed this if I knew that it was going to bring disgrace to God. Would you ever admit that you wouldn't have? Right? You'd be embarrassed to say that you didn't care, right? Not everybody cares about the honor of God. And therefore, you might be forced to say, oh, yes, yes, I never would have said that, even though really you would have. And therefore, it's not a valid way to annul a vow. Or because then people won't go to the sage, to the chacham, to annul a vow. They'll just say, oh, if I would have known, right, I would never have taken this vow. It's not nice for God. I don't even have to ask anybody about it. It's automatically annulled, which is not the case. Um, so remember in the Mishnah, we said that if the vow deals with the parents or affects the parents directly, so then you can use that as a petach. But right, we said again, when it involves the parents, you can use it. Um, and here we are going to go into a time where Moshe took a vow, and then, right, he basically takes a vow to Yitro, his father-in-law, that he will not leave Midian, right? But then he says, right, all the people who wanted to kill me died, so now I can go back to Egypt, right? So what is the Gemara saying? Wait a minute, all the people dying, that's nolad. That's something new, right? They just died. And therefore, that proves that nolad works, that a new development works. The Gemara says no, right? The Chachamim, the sages, don't agree with this because really, when you look carefully in the text, right? Who are the people that wanted to kill Moshe? Datan and Aviram. Now, Datan and Aviram really, right, they're the ones who wanted to kill Moshe, and they're still alive, right? They didn't die. We know that they live a very long life through the redemption, right, through the Yitziat Mitzrayim. They leave Egypt with the nation. They stir up all types of trouble in the desert. So we know that they're still alive. Rather, why did Moshe say they died? They didn't really die. Rather, they lost all of their possessions. And therefore, it's as if they died, right? And the Gemara here at the bottom of 64 tells us there's a group of people who, even though they're still alive, it's as if they died. Who are these people? Right? Poor people, if they have leprosy, tzaraat, someone who goes blind, and someone who doesn't have children. And this is all based on verses, but it seems they're seen as if they died, but really they didn't. Daf 65 tells us that you can only annul a vow in the presence of the person involved, right? So if there's a person involved in your vow, right, I will never step foot into, John Smith's house. So if I go to annul the vow, he needs to be present when I annul the vow. Where do we learn this from? From Moshe, again, the same idea. Moshe had to annul the vow in Midian in front of Yitro, right? Because it was he said it to Yitro. Therefore, he needed to be there to annul the vow. Another vow here is the story of Tzidkiyahu, who rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. Right? Nebuchadnezzar made Tzidkiyahu take a vow not to tell people an embarrassing story about him. And Tzidkiyahu felt so bad that he annulled the vow, but not in front of Nebuchadnezzar. And he got so upset, and Sanhedrin felt bad that they made this mistake in the law, and they let him annul the vow without doing it in front of Nebuchadnezzar. Um, and the Sanhedrin, the court, felt bad that they made the wrong halachic decision. Um, so here again, we see that if someone needs to annul a vow, they must do it in front of the person that it involves as well. The next Mishnah tells us, right? Let's say a person says, I won't marry this woman because her father is bad. And then it turns out that the father died, or he did tshuva, he's now repentant, and he's now a good person. So the Mishnah says this is like nolad, but also not like nolad, right? This is, it is, but it isn't. Another case, right? I won't go into this house because there's a bad dog there. And again, the dog died. So again, is it like nolad or not? So the Gemara says, right, again, as we mentioned before, dying is nolad, meaning when someone dies, it is a new development. At the time of the vow, they were alive, and now they are no longer alive. So the Gemara says, no. This case that we mentioned in the Mishnah is where the person made his vow contingent on this idea, right? I won't go into the house if the dog that lives there is bad, right? If it's not bad, so now you don't have a vow, right? So when the dog, let's say, died, so then it's as if there's no vow, right? Or the opposite case, basically, the person took the vow after that person died, right? Let's say the father, right? So they say that I'm not going to marry this woman because she has a bad father. Let's say the father died before the person took the vow. Therefore, it's not nolad, right? It's not a new development. Next case, a person says, I won't marry this girl because she is, and now you can fill the blank with any negative thing you can think to say about a woman, right? And the Gemara gives many examples. She's ugly, she's dark, she's tall, she's short, right? Fill in the blanks. And it turns out that really she is, now fill in the blank with whatever nice thing you want to say, right? She's pretty, she's light, she's tall, she's short, but the opposite, right? Whatever the person wanted. So then that vow is not a real vow because it turns out the girl is not what they thought she was. And the Mishnah says specifically, it's not that she was ugly and now she's pretty. Rather, she was pretty the whole time. So that seems to be right that seems to be an issue that we see, and we will get back to this idea in a little bit. Next Mishnah. The next Mishnah says that you can find a petach from the Torah. What does that mean? Right? A person says, if you knew that you were, you can say to the person, if you knew that you were transgressing the following, right? Don't take revenge or don't hold a grudge. Would you ever have taken this vow? No, I never would have taken that vow. Therefore, that works, right? Or the idea of the ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? Love your fellow neighbor, your fellow Jew as you love yourself, right? If you take a vow that you'll never eat at this person's house again, that is not fulfilling the commandment of treating everybody in a good way. Or another verse, right? V'chai achicha imach, right? You have to live together in harmony with your brother. And now let's say you can't support him, right? This person cannot get benefit from me. So you can say, oh, if I knew that I had an obligation to support this person, I never would have taken this vow. The Gemara says, um, you right, wait a minute, why can't he say, right, let's say you say to him, you have a responsibility for this person, and the person, so the Gemara says the person cannot say, I don't have a personal responsibilities to support this person by myself, right? You can support that person, so I'm fine, right? I don't need to support that person. The Gemara says no. If the person is his relative, then you do have a personal responsibility to support this person, and therefore, um, you can annul the vow based on this verse. Next Mishnah, you can use a woman's ktuva as a petach. What does that mean? Right, a man takes a vow not to have relations with his wife, but again, before they're married, but right, we know that a man is obligated to his wife in this way. So then, right, what does he do? Right, we say that he needs to pay her entire ktuva because he can't remain married to her. So then he can say, I never would have taken that vow if I would have known that I have to pay the whole ktuva to get out of this marriage. Therefore, that's enough of a petach, of an opening, and you can annul the vow based on this issue. So the Gemara says, right, you need to use all his money. Right, he needs to use all of his money to pay the ketuvah. Right, if he takes a vow that he cannot have relations with his wife, he needs to divorce her and pay her every penny that he owes her. Now there's a machloket if we let the person keep some of his money for his living expenses, and maybe the rest goes to the creditor, to the person that he owes, or do we say that we take all of the person's money? This daf seems to imply that we take it all, right? That he owes, if he owes the woman a full ketuvah, he needs to pay for the full ketuvah. Or no, maybe that's not the case. Maybe he can pay it in installments, but he has to pay it all eventually. When our Mishnah says he has to pay it all, it doesn't necessarily mean in one shot. It could mean in installments, and therefore we don't have a proof either way. Daf 66, the Mishnah says you can use Shabbat and a festival as a petach. What does that mean? Right, I won't eat meat, but you need to eat meat on Shabbat. Therefore, the vow is annulled. They used to just, right, so let's say a person takes a vow to not eat meat at all, and we just said that you need to eat meat on Shabbat. So originally, they used to just allow eating meat on Shabbat, but the rest of the week, the person still couldn't eat meat. And then Rabbi Akiva came along and taught that if you annul a vow partially, you annul it completely. So we actually saw this previously towards the beginning of the Masechet, but this is the Mishnah, this is the source. If you vow, and we did this before, but this is the source again. If you vow against a group of people and then annul it for one person, therefore you are allowed. You allow for everybody, right? Again, we say if he says konam, right? You are kulchem. All of you are forbidden to me, or I am to you. If you permit one, you permit everyone, right? Let's say you say, I am forbidden from you, and from you, and from you, right? Lezeh u lezeh. If you annul the first person, so then you annul everyone, because they seem to be connected one to the other. But if you only annul the last person, then only that last person is annulled, and everyone before is still forbidden. What about a middle person, right? So from the middle person to the end is permitted. Before that is still forbidden, right? What if you say, I, right, benefit from this person is forbidden, and from this person is forbidden, and from this person is forbidden. Each person is seen as separate, they're not linked, and therefore you need a petach for each person individually. Um, what if you say, wine is forbidden to me because it's bad for your stomach? And then it turns out only one type of wine is bad for your stomach. All of them become permissible, again, because of what we just mentioned before, because it was partially annulled, the whole thing becomes annulled in the first place. So too with different types of onions, right? If you say, I will not eat onions because, again, they're bad for you, and it turns out only one type is bad, all of them become permissible. So the Gemara says, right, not only is wine not bad for you, but there are actually different types of wine that are good for you. And therefore, again, that's another reason to annul the vow. Next Mishnah. You can use the honor of oneself and one's children as a petach, right? So we started with, it's interesting when we look at the Mishnayot, right? We started with parents, we started with God, then we went to Shabbat, Chagim, now we're going to one's self and one's children can also be a petach, right? Can also be a way to annul a vow. How does that work? Right? If I would have known what they would say about me, I never would have taken this vow, right? Or if I would have known what they would say about my children, I would never take a vow. The Mishnah continues, right? I won't marry her because she is, again, fill in every negative term you can think of, right? Ugly, short, all of those things. And it turns out that she isn't, right? There is no neder because it was based on a mistake. But if she was, fill in the blank of any negative statement, and then she changed, right, or improved, then the neder still stands. The vow still stands. And here, there's a fascinating story about women who were, again, not attractive, and then they became beautiful, and then they annulled the vow because he never would have taken the vow if he would have known how beautiful she is. And here the Mishnah describes how Rabbi Yishmael actually said, all Jewish girls are beautiful. And if you think that they aren't, then it's really because they're so poor that they can't take care of themselves, and that makes them less beautiful. But really, they are so beautiful that that again, it would annul the vow as well. And it seems the Gemara describes that, again, Rabbi Ishmael said that if she was ugly and became beautiful, the vow is annulled. And here the Gemara brings a few stories about Rabbi Ishmael, who this girl had a fake tooth and it was really ugly, again, because she was so poor. And he actually replaced it with a gold tooth. And now all of a sudden, she is so beautiful that everybody wants to marry her. And it's just very fascinating to see that Rabbi Ishmael really cared for these women. And here I will send you all, I would say, advise all of you to go check out my friend Shuli Mishkin wrote a really great article, as she always does every week, for Hadran. It's on the Hadran website. She wrote an article about Rabbi Yishmael and how Rabbi Yishmael was very unique. He came from a very unique background, and he lived in a very poor, poverty-stricken area and time in history, and that's why he was so sensitive about the physical appearance of people. And I think it's just, again, I guess on one hand we read the Mishnah and it takes us aback that people could be so I guess, motivated by physical traits. But on the other hand, Rabbi Shmuel, who says, right, all Jewish women are beautiful. I actually just listened to a fascinating podcast that talked about dating and how, should you, attach a picture when you're trying to set people up or not, right? Is physical, um, I guess, not is physical attraction important? I think everyone agrees that it is, but is it something that you can base things off of from a picture right away, or is it something that you build over time? So I think it's interesting that even in the Gemara, again, as I say often, I think the Gemara is very forward thinking, even though some things we are taken aback by some comments. I think it's just interesting to see how Chachamim, how the sages really said there's no such thing as an ugly girl, right? Maybe you're not attracted to her, but there's no such thing as an ugly girl. So I thought that was just very interesting. There are other, on Daf 66, other vows that certain husbands took against their wives that seem to be extremely dishonorable, right? A man took a vow that his wife can't get any benefit from him till she serves food, like literally feeds food to two sages. This seemed to be extremely dishonorable to them. One of them kind of heard about the vow and accepted the food. The other one didn't. And there are more stories about these rash vows that husbands take against their wives and how it was dishonorable. And again, terrible stories, I think, about how people are very rash. Again, a husband says, you can't benefit from me till Rabbi Shmuel finds something beautiful about you. And, it goes through very vividly. Rabbi Shmuel is like, oh, maybe she is tall, maybe she's short, maybe she's like this or like this. It turns out she is really not good looking. And he says, she has a beautiful name that fits her, I guess, physical appearance. And it's such a beautiful name, even though her name was Lichluchit, which meant dirty. But again, the name was beautiful in the sense that it described her. So again, I think that this is a little tongue-in-cheek. I think that these men are extremely negative and dishonorable, and basically we want to annul all of these vows. A man married a woman who wasn't so smart. She took everything he said like literally, right? So when it seems that he was from Bavel and she was from Eretz Israel, from Israel. So maybe it wasn't just her intelligence, maybe it was basically a lack of communication. And the Gemara describes with great detail, right? He would say, can you cook a few lentils for me? So she would cook 2 lentils, right? She didn't really understand nuance in the language. And basically they didn't understand each other. And it was a very complicated relationship. With that, we finish the 9th chapter. And now we're going to begin the 10th chapter. Now, till now, we were talking about a petach, right? A way of a hatarat nedarim, a way to annul a vow. This chapter, we're going to learn the next concept, and that concept is hafara. So we're going to call it revoking a vow. This is done by the father or a husband. They can revoke a woman's vow on the day that they hear about the vow. And now we're going to learn, we are going to learn how this works. So the Gemara at the very bottom of 66, going on to 67, tells us that a betrothed maiden, right, a na'ara murasa, this is a girl who is 12 to 12 and a half, who is betrothed. So then her father and her husband jointly need to revoke her vow. So it's important to understand a young girl, right, under 12, living in her father's house, single, her father can revoke her vows. A married woman, her husband can revoke her vows. And we'll talk about how and what the vow is about in great detail. But now we're going to discuss a betrothed girl. And it's interesting to think about what is her status. Rabbi Johnny Solomon, if you don't follow him on Facebook, or he has a WhatsApp also, he does a daily thought on the daf. And on this daf, he really spoke about this idea. Maybe on one hand, we think, how could it be that the husband or the father have control over the girl, which we will discuss. But I think here it's interesting to focus on, right, what is this girl's status, right? When someone is engaged, right, they're kind of half in their parents' house, right? They're still living in their parents' house, and half, right, on their way out of their parents' house. And he actually discussed it. I thought it was just fascinating in terms of the time period when a couple are, when they're engaged. What does that relationship look like? What is the relationship between the child, the woman and her parents, and the woman and her new, right, soon to be husband? And I think that that's what this Mishnah, the Gemara, are really focusing on, right? And we recognize that she's in both worlds, right? And therefore, she's not in either, right? The fact that she's in both means she's not solely in either one. And therefore, both the father and the husband need to jointly revoke her vow. So I think it's just a fascinating idea. If the father revokes it, does hafara, and not the husband, or the opposite, it doesn't work, right? You can't do one or the other. It needs to be both. The Gemara on Daf 67 tells us, right, maybe the Mishnah meant to say, right, either or, right? Again, it says the father and the husband. So maybe it meant either or. And the Gemara says no, right? Both. They need to jointly revoke the vow. And if one of them is mekayem means he ratifies, he upholds the vow. Of course, the other side now cannot revoke it because one side upheld it, right? They have to do it together. It doesn't mean at exactly the same time, but it does mean that they both need the same desire to revoke the vow. So here, the Gemara now tells us that there are 3 verses that teach that both of them need to revoke the vow, right? The first verse talks about a single girl and her father revoking the vow. The second and the third verse talk about a married woman. And now the Gemara says we don't need 2 verses, 2 psukim, to talk about a married woman that her husband can revoke the vow. Therefore, one of them must be talking about the betrothed girl. Or maybe one verse teaches that the husband can't revoke the vow made before they were married, right? Maybe we do need 2 verses talking about a married woman. Or maybe we need 2 verses to say that maybe the father can still revoke on his own, right? Or maybe the husband can do it on his own, or neither can do it, right? Rather, both of them need to do it. And the Gemara continues that a betrothed man can revoke his betrothed prior vows, because just like the father has partial power to revoke her vows, so too can the soon-to-be husband, meaning they're seen as parallel, the father and the husband, even though the husband wasn't, the husband beforehand, he still has equal power. Daf 68 tells us, right, that there's a verse used right, the verse used to revoke the betrothed vows by the father and the husband, again, together. Right? The husband can revoke the vows that affect their mutual relationship. Now, this is extremely important. It's important to recognize that it's not, I don't want to say total control, but it's not, right? Meaning the husband can't revoke any vow that he wants, rather, only something that affects their relationship. Um, so now we get into a whole discussion of when the husband revokes his part of the vow, is it that he's cutting away his part of the vow, but the other half remains, meaning fully, right, or right, fully that half, or does he weaken the whole vow, right, and therefore he downgrades the entire vow, and therefore the girl, let's say she goes right, transgresses this vow, maybe she isn't going to be punished in the full extent because he weakened the vow. So now we're going to see, actually, the next Mishnah is going to teach that if the Na'ara Mu'urasa, right, this betrothed maiden, if um, if the father dies, the husband doesn't get full, we can call it veto power, right? Hafara power, and her vows can never be revoked. But if the husband dies, the father does get full veto power. So now we're going to learn 5 different cases. Only the last one is going to be what we're talking about now, but we're going to go through each one of the cases. So, case number 1, if the husband didn't hear about the vow and then he died, right? So he didn't give any opinion. And the father, right? So then the father can revoke the vow, meaning he gets full power. But if he heard about it, meaning the husband, and upheld it, or didn't say anything, and then he died the next day, the father cannot revoke it because, right, the other half wasn't revoked. So now he cannot. Next case, if the father heard it and revoked it, and then the husband didn't hear about it yet, but then the father died, the husband cannot revoke it alone, right? He's not strong enough to revoke it. Next case, the husband heard it and revoked it, so he did his part, and then died before the father heard it. The father can now revoke it alone because, right, half was already done, and now he can do his part. Next case, 4th case, husband heard it and revoked it. The father didn't hear it, and now the father died. The husband cannot revoke it again without the father, so that doesn't work. Daf 69, last case, father revoked it, husband didn't hear about it, and he died. Now the father can revoke the husband's part. So the Gemara tells us this is according to Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel say the father cannot. And now the Gemara says, from here we see that Beit Shammai holds that he's cutting away his part. That's why the father can revoke his part again, right? But Beit Hillel say, no, 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 it only weakens it. And therefore, the father cannot revoke it after the husband dies. So here the Gemara says that there's a verse that says, again, on the day that he heard the vow, therefore, you only have 1 day to revoke the vow, right? You can't like sleep on it and 2 months later say, this is too much, never mind, right? You can only do it on the first day that you hear it. If the father or the husband uphold the vow, so that means, right, they agree to the vow, So now, can she, the girl, go to a sage, to the chacham, to annul it, right? Can you ask to annul it after they already revoke it, right? To uphold it, right? How does that work? So the Gemara says, if they agree to the vow, she can actually go to try and annul it. That works. But you can't ask to annul it after they revoked it. That doesn't do anything, right? There's no vow to uphold. They already revoked that vow to begin with. What happens, the Gemara asks, if the husband upholds it twice, right? He's mekayem and then mekayem. He says it twice. And then he tries to annul one of the times that he said, I uphold this vow. So the question is, right, does the second upholding, right, does it take effect? So the Gemara says yes, right? Basically, what happens is he says, I uphold it, I uphold it. Now, the second one kind of hangs in the air because it has nowhere to go. So this, once this gets knocked out, this falls back into place, and now he has upheld the vow, right? What if he says, I uphold the vow and I revoke it, right? What does that mean? That can't work together. Maybe he meant it consecutively, like I uphold it and then I revoke it. So the Gemara says, let's try to see if we can find another case that's similar. The case that's brought is the case of tmura. If you remember, tmura means when, let's say you have an animal that we sanctified to be a sacrifice, and then you try to transfer its sanctity, its kedusha, to another animal. So it works and it doesn't work. It works in the sense that it makes the new animal sanctified, but it doesn't work because it doesn't take away the sanctity of the original animal. So now, let's see. We're talking about this double language, right? Let's say a person says, this animal is going to be, right, instead of an olah and instead of a shlamim, right, the same animal. So the Gemara says the animal becomes an olah, like the first thing that he said. But maybe he meant, right, one and then the other, right? How does that work? Or maybe he meant it at the same time. How does that work? An animal can't become both. Rather, they have to wait till the animal gets a blemish, sell the animal, and split the money. Half goes to one sacrifice, and the other half goes to another sacrifice. But with a vow, right? Maybe he said he wanted it to be both, not one after the other. Therefore, if he said both, I want to uphold it and revoke it, what did he mean? Maybe he intended to revoke it, says the Gemara, and maybe it is revoked. The next thing, maybe he asks, I want to uphold it, and I uphold and revoke your vow, right? He puts it together. This seems to be one statement. And the Gemara says that does not work at all, because since you can't do it since you can't do it together, right, you can't do it one after the other, and therefore this language does not work. With that, we finish through Daf 69, which is through tomorrow's Daf. Next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will meet at our regular day and time, and we will pick it up where we left off. So wishing everyone a wonderful week and really a Shavua Tov, right? It's only Sunday, so we can say that. Wishing everyone a Shavua Tov, and see you next week, everyone.